Well, good morning, everybody. It is good to see you all. I hopefully got to fist bump with most of you at the very least, and except for those online, that's not quite possible, but I can try. So we've been talking this series about the whole idea of, turning upward, turning inward, and today we're talking about turning outward. And as we do that, I wanted to open today with a little survey. I'm going to ask sort of like two things and say, which is your favorite? And so in the room, we'll raise our hands in just a moment for whichever one is your favorite. And if you're online, go ahead and type it in the conversation, the comment boxes where, whichever one applies to you, put that down. So number one, are you ready? Oh, come on. Are you ready? Yes. This church needs to wake up because we're now talking about Krispy Kreme or Dunkin' Donuts. All right. So Krispy Kreme, where's my Krispy Kreme people? All right, where's my Dunkin' Donuts people? Terry, are you barking over there? Who's barking? Very nice. All right, barking for Dunkin' Donuts. By the way, the winner is Krispy Kreme because I like Krispy Kreme. Thank you very much. Number two, FSU or UF. So Seminoles or Gators. Where's the Seminoles? Where's the Gators? Clearly, the University of South Florida wins. All right, that's good. And all you Ohio State fans, I know you're out there and you're going, Buckeyes. All right, whatever. All right, number three, we're going to make it a little bit easier. McDonald's or Chick-fil-A? McDonald's? We're not loving it. Okay. Chick-fil-A? Woo! I sort of thought that'd be a little bit of an easier one for y'all because like Chick-fil-A. But when you think about it, guys, Ford, Chevy, Republican, Democrat, Walmart, Target, Visa, MasterCard, Pop, soda, right? We make comparisons all the time. It's just part of our lives. It's what we do. And comparisons aren't necessarily a bad thing, but they can be. And especially when it comes to the church, if we're doing things in terms of comparing, there's a danger to us when we get to a place, we're going to be reading about it, where we start to make comparisons. And I was saying, from the perspective of the church, I want to ask a question. And I think that if I asked a teacher, they'd say one answer, and I think if we asked a theologian, we'd get a different answer. Is church singular or plural? And when you think about it, a church is singular. Like the teacher would say, it's singular because it's a noun, it's a place, it's a thing. You go to it, right? You come to church. You come here and, come to an address. It's 133233 Indian Rocks Road, Largo, Florida. For those of you who are online and don't know your way, you can now look up the address, right? You can get here. You can come to this place. You can make a phone call here. 727-595-2581. You want to talk to me? Extension 243. You give me a call. The church is a location. There's a website for us called Anona.com. There's a place you can go. And yet if you asked a theologian, is church singular or plural, they would say it's plural. It's plural. It's based out of a Greek word called ecclesia that's talking about the idea of a gathering. It's a gathering of those who are called. And therefore, it's not singular, it is plural. The problem we have is that we have a problem with the plural. We have a problem with the plural. We have a problem with, therefore, unity. Because a lot of times we make these comparisons that rather than saying we are unified as one, that we instead split into two. And what happens is that we're comparing, and when we compare, we tend to do things with that comparison, especially when I'm comparing myself to someone else. And what will happen is we'll get to a place where we're doing things like criticizing rather than congratulating. We're tearing down rather than building up. We're finding fault rather than celebrating success. And underlying each one of those moments of decision between those two places of tension is that word comparison, where we're looking at these two things and we're comparing, but it doesn't necessarily have to be bad when we compare. And yet the story we're going to read today, we're going to find out the comparison in this particular case, it ain't so good. We're reading from Luke's Gospel, chapter 18, beginning at verse 9. And It's a story. It's Jesus telling a story. So it's not like it's happening like right in front of them, but he's trying to create in their mind's eye this story. And here's what he said. He also told this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and regarded others with contempt. 2 men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. And the Pharisee was standing by himself, and as he was doing so, he was praying thus. God, I thank you that I'm not like other people. I'm not like thieves, rogues, adulterers, or even like this tax collector who's here praying at the same time as me. I fast twice a week. I give 1/10 of all my income. But the tax collector, on the other hand, was standing far off and would not even look up to heaven, but was beating his breast and saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. I tell you this man went down to his home justified rather than the other. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, but all who humble themselves will be exalted. The grass withers, the flower fades, but the word of our Lord endures forever. Thank God I'm not like blank. Have you ever thought that? Have you ever said that? Have you said it to another person? If we're honest, what I'm hearing in the room is a few, yes, of course, I did. And the reality is we have. All of us have taken this story and had it come real in our lives, and not in a good way. We look at the Pharisee and we're like, that's me, that's me. We're not immune from being the Pharisee in the story. But neither were many of Jesus' followers. The very people that walked with him, the people that were learning from him, that got to be with him and hear his teachings, they did the same thing. They made comparisons that brought the other person down or elevated themselves up. You think of John's gospel. John's gospel, the author, John, as he's writing it, constantly puts in there the disciple who Jesus loved. And guess who he's talking about? He's talking about himself. Almost as if I'm the one that he loved, maybe not so much the others. Even in the story in John's gospel, his version of the moment where Jesus rises from the dead on Easter, he has to say, I was running with Peter to the tomb, but I got there first. I got there first. He has to emphasize who was the first one to the tomb. There's another moment where Jesus is walking along, his disciples are behind him, and all of a sudden he hears them arguing. He's like, what are you guys arguing about? Even though he already knows. They were arguing about who was the greatest among them. They're comparing themselves to one another. It's like, no, I'm better than you, thank you very much. Clearly, you're not as sophisticated as I am. Oh, no, he loves me more. Oh, no, I've done more. I can the whole idea of this comparison happening that leads to argument forming amongst the disciples. There's another moment where James and John, their mother comes with them. And they go to Jesus, and she's asking him a question. Hey, Jesus, would you mind if my boys, if they could sit at your right hand and your left hand? Would you mind if they could do that? And Jesus is like, say what? And the other disciples go, say what? So those disciples are now over here, and they're going, what are you doing? And another argument forms. And guys, every time that we do comparison like that, every time we try and put somebody below us so that we can be above them, arguments tend to form. I love how Andy Stanley put this. He was talking about this idea of, the comparison trap. And he did a whole sermon series called The Land of Ur. Not Ur as in you are, the place where Abraham in the Old Testament left on his journey, but Ur as in E-R. And he goes on to talk about this is us. This is us as humans, what we do. We're Ur people. It's not good enough that I'm rich. I have to be richer. And I don't have to be just richer. I have to be richer than you. And we don't tend to compare ourselves to the Elon Musks of the world or the Bill Gates of the world. We tend to compare ourselves with people that we know, people that we can compare ourselves to and say, we're about here, and yet that person's there. They moved up to here, and doggone it, I start feeling something inside like, why is that not me? So why can't I be richer than that person? We have kids. We want our kids to be smart, but we don't want them just to be smart. We want to be smarter. So we send them off to a magnet school. We isolate them from the population that may not be having the same skill set and make it where they can get further ahead and have better advantage over the other kids who can't be as smart as my kid. That's a harder one to hear. We hear other ers that he talks about. He talks about funny-er. Right? I got to be the person that when you walk into the room I'm recognized for walking in the room. People gravitate towards me. People want to be with me. People want to talk to me because I'm funny. And I need to be funnier than somebody else because they might gravitate towards them. There's so many different ways that we can add the on top. When you think of the Pharisee is saying, I am righteous-er than that tax collector. I'm righteous-er than them. And at the root underneath all of it is this idea of better. Better. I want to be better than the other people. I want to be better than even the people that I know, people that I love. I want them to look up to me. Or maybe it's this route. More-er. I want to have more-er than you. I want to have my stuff. I want to have a nicer car. I want to have a bigger house. All that stuff sort of weaves in there, and we want these things. The problem is we don't want to walk that road. Here's how Nested Jojo Erskine put it. Your happiness shouldn't come with victims. And when you're doing comparisons to other people, when you're looking at your life, the way to know if your comparisons are getting off track, the way to know it is when you're starting to create victims. People that you have to push down in order for you to be looking like you're lifted up. And the thing is, we don't just do it to other people. We don't just look at other people and say, I'm better than them. I have more than them. We can do it to ourselves, can't we? Can we beat ourselves up? Can we look at our lives and say, sometimes maybe I sort of look like the tax collector. Picture the tax collector, right? So it says that the Pharisee's looking over at the tax collector, sees him standing off. What if the tax collector also sees the Pharisee? And he's looking, and he's in that room, in that temple with him, and as he's looking at the Pharisee, his head goes down just like it says in the scripture. He says, who am I? Who am I compared to that? Who am I? I can't be righteous like that guy. I bet he's thinking about me, about being a tax collector. And he's right to be doing so, because in Scripture, when you hear about tax collectors, the thing is that happens with them is that they tend to take advantage of people. They collect the money for the Roman Empire, and they add more money on top of it for themselves. And sometimes they make that more and more because they have the authority of the Roman Empire underneath them to give them that ability to ask for more. The people don't necessarily know, hey, you're being taxed at 15%. This person could be saying, no, it's 40%. And the government might only be getting 15. Or no, you know what, I'm going to do 50%, but 15 is only going to the government. They're choosing that, and they're putting people in difficult places. And so you can picture him having this moment where it's like, who am I kidding? Why am I here? I was reading, as I was studying for this, Psychology Today, and they call it the danger of this, shoulding yourselves. The danger of shoulding yourselves. That you can get to a place where it's like, I should be blank. I should be more wealthy. I should be, you just take whatever the blank is and you fill it in for yourself. The danger of it is that we are comparing ourselves to others. I should, let's say you're younger, and you're like 28, approaching 30 years old, I should be married by now. Or maybe you're in your 30s and you are married, I should have kids by now. Or maybe you have kids and it's like, I should be calmer than I am, right? We're constantly shoulding ourselves and saying, this is, the way I am is not the way I should be. And there's a healthy way to do that and an unhealthy way to do it. And when you look at the story of the tax collector, he does it the healthy way. He says, look at me, a sinner. The difference that's happening in this moment when he's got that happening in his life is that he's going, instead of criticizing himself, he's confessing about himself. Criticism versus confession. When it comes to looking at who you are and how you live your life, that you don't end up so worried about what you should have been that you bring yourself down and instead find a place where, you know what, I'm going to unload this to God. Here's the thing that happens in that moment. Is a lot of times we look at the story and it's like you look at the Pharisee and it's clear he's the bad guy and the tax collector's the good guy, and that's wrong. He's the bad guy, and so is he. They're both not righteous. They're both messed up. The thing is, they take comparison in two different ways. You can take comparison towards the criticism, or you can take comparison towards confession. And the only thing that's different about this guy isn't that he's not messed up. He does harm. It's that he's able to confess it to God in a way that is authentic. It's not that he is righteous. The story is about him being made righteous. Now, I look at this, and as I was reading this, I was like, it almost looks like Jesus is also touching a little bit on the Ten Commandments. Because if you look in here, he mentions three things, right? You know, the Pharisee he puts words in the Pharisee's mouth in the story of, thank God that I'm not like, thieves. I'm not like evildoers. I'm not like adulterers. And I'm not like that tax collector. All right, so those first three, if you think of the bottom 5 Ten Commandments, 6 through 10, thou shalt not, the big one is thou shalt not, right? Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not lie. Close. The very last one is covet, all right? And I'm wondering, when you look at those 5, sin is sin is sin is sin, all right? And yet these are laid out in such a way that they build this way. So number 10, covet is the least severe. Lying gets more severe. Stealing gets more severe. Adultery, destroying relationships, gets more severe. Totally eliminating a person is the most severe. And if maybe right down here, the thing that leads to that first one that can lead to the others is comparing. Comparing can lead to coveting. Because really, when you think about it, coveting is looking at and saying, they got something I don't that I want. You're comparing your life to their life and saying, I wish I had that. I wish I had that life. I wish I had that thing. I wish I had their kid. Whatever it may be, you just sort of fill that in. I wish. And the comparing is the place that can lead to this. But when we look in here, if we went into Exodus and found the 10 Commandments, you will not find a commandment that says, thou shalt not compare. It doesn't exist. Because you can compare in a good way and you can compare in a bad way. And what we're seeing today is that they're comparing in a not so good way. And when you think about the whole idea of that Pharisee, the story is pointing out, Pharisee, when you look at and you say, thank God that I'm not like those 10 Commandment people that are messed up, that are thieves, that are adulterers, that are evildoers, you're among them. You're one of them. So stop comparing yourself and thinking you're not. Comparing yourself and thinking you're above, that you're more righteous, that you're better, that you're good. There is no thou shalt not compare. It's not about whether you compare. It's about how you compare. And so I want to ask a few questions. And this sort of can cut closer to the nerve. When it comes to comparison, what do you guys think? You're driving down the road, you come up to a traffic light, it's red, and it's causing you to stop. And there's that person standing over there with a sign and a little bucket. And they start walking up the road. What are you thinking as they do it? What do you think as you drive just down here? Right? So just down Wilcox Road and you go into the Ridgecrest community. There's a public housing area there. Not just the homes that are being built by Habitat, there's an actual public housing area there. What do you think when you drive through, or do you not? Do you avoid the neighborhood? Do you lock your doors and put up your windows? Have you ever walked anywhere in that neighborhood? Have you ever been inside one of their homes to see what it's like to live in subsidized housing? Have you ever thought about what might be going through their minds having to live in subsidized housing? What do you do when a friend gets a nice new car and you still got your old 10-year-old car? What's going through your head? What's going through your heart? What if they get a bigger house? What if your workplace, you have a coworker and they got the promotion, but you didn't? What are you thinking of them? What are you finding in them to bring them down or to build them up as you make the comparison? What do you think if you're a Democrat? What do you think of Republicans as you compare yourselves to them? What do you think of, if you're a Republican, of Democrats? What do you harbor in your heart when you make that comparison judgment? What do you think? There's so many stories right now on the news, like almost every day I feel like I turn it on and it's a police officer that's done something bad. What's it causing you to think about law enforcement in general? What do you think about Black Lives Matter? What do you think about having to wear masks? What do you think about if you didn't have to wear masks? What do you think about vaccine or not vaccine and those people who get them or don't get them? Comparison, guys, can lead us into very dark places if we let it. If we choose to walk down a path that looks like the path of the Pharisee. But guys, the Christian way is way different. The Christian way is way different than all that judgment that seeks to put somebody down, to make a victim out of somebody else. Because what I think is right. The way I live is better. The things I have are more. Therefore, my opinion matters more. When you compare yourselves to others, guys, when you start looking at this and it's like you're comparing yourselves to others, where do your comparisons lead? Do they lead to criticism or to confession? Do they lead to building up or to tearing down? Do they lead to celebrating success or finding fault? Do they lead to unity or to division? This is the question. This isn't just the question. This is the teaching I think Jesus is trying to get across. To realize that we can make these comparisons that drive a wedge between us and the other. So, church is plural. And the danger we face is when we start comparing ourselves to others inside the church or outside that drives that wedge in. So which is it? Krispy Kreme or Dunkin' Donuts? FSU or UF? Follower of Christ or something else? Who have you been? Who are you? And better yet, who do you want to be? This table is a table that represents today's story. It represents us being able to bring our stuff. Bring our stuff to Jesus. Be the tax collector. Be able to confess the places where we mess up, where we think wrong, where we do wrong, where we say wrong. And to hear the same words that were spoken of the tax collector. You come out of this table exalted, lifted up, washed clean. Who will you be? A little more like Jesus, a little bit less like you. Love the line. Here's the thing, guys. We can seek to be better than others, or we can seek to be better to, for, and with others. That's the invitation. The choice is yours. God bless you, you bunch of tax collecting, thieving, evil-doing sinners. Me too. Amen.